Today on the Videomaker podcast, Chris and I talk all about transitions. And of course, when we're talking about transitions, we have to, mention the obligatory 95% of transitions are cuts, and that's definitely what we're going to talk about. But we talk about tons of other transitions, and we kind of draw a line where where the acceptable transitions end and the really obscure, crazy transitions begin, to try to help you determine, whether or not you should include the next wild transition in your next project. As always, if you've been listening to the podcast and you enjoy it, we'd love it if you went to iTunes or Spotify or Stitcher or some other podcast app and hit the subscribe button. It will deliver the podcast right to your mobile device, and it's a big help for us. So, all that out of the way, let's get on with the show. But first, I want to tell you about MPB. MPB is the world's largest online platform for used photography and videography equipment. MPB is a destination for everyone, whether you've just discovered your passion for visual storytelling or you're already a pro. MPB recirculates more than 300,000 items of used gear every year, extending the life and creative potential of photo and video equipment for visual storytellers around the world. Headquartered in the creative community of Brooklyn, the MPB team includes trained camera experts and seasoned photographers and videographers who bring their passion to work every day to deliver outstanding service. Every piece of kit is inspected carefully by their product specialists and comes with a 6-month warranty to give customers peace of mind that buying used doesn't mean sacrificing on quality or reliability. Visit mpb.com to find out more. Welcome to the Videomaker podcast. I'm Mike Wilhelm, and with me, as always, is Chris Monlux.
Hello.
And today we're talking about, every beginner's favorite topic, transitions.
Transitions. This is like the first time you get to edit and you get to do anything of any consequence. This is the first special effect, I wouldn't even call it that, but that most got to use. And I first experienced it doing linear editing, going from one VHS deck to another through a board that had images of all of the different transitions. Mm-hmm. And I remember there was a heart wipe and a cube and all sorts of different things.
Cube.
Yeah, and none of them...
Page peel.
Yeah, none of them looked good. I mean, they were all bad. And really, when it comes to transitions, 95% of things are cuts.
Yeah.
That's so we're talking about the other 5% you're going to use, but they can be really helpful when you need them. And there's some really signature ones here that are just going to scream certain genres.
Yeah. So, I don't know, Chris, I feel like you and I learned how to edit video so long ago that, all the different crazy transitions were really fun when you edited your first video and you could use the cube transition or the page peel or whatever. I don't know if new video editors have that same amount of joy.
Well, because they have so much more other things that are cool to start off with. They could start with lightning bolts if they wanted to.
Yeah.
Whereas there was no hope for that at all. Mm-hmm. Maybe you could do that. And or this might be something that people just don't even think outside of the cut, because it is so prevalent, right? So if you are just starting out, you might just think that's the transition thing. And I'd have to say, it's transitions are more a flow thing for me when I'm editing, and less about the scene you're going in. It's more of like sometimes you use it to get to another location, or you use it to cut to some other certain kind of graphic or something like that. But I just said cut, but you might be doing it to soften the transition or to indicate something. But they can be used for all sorts of things. Definitely I think the heart wipe, like the kiss cam, you see, watching, you just stop the transition halfway through, and there you got a little heart around people. Mm-hmm. It's bad and cheesy, but you kind of got to use them to find what ones work for you. And, it's interesting because some, since we've started, have gone in and out of fashion. And I remember there being ones that I thought were the future, or was just like, oh, these are rad. And now you wouldn't get caught dead doing them. But ones that I remember thinking were cheesy or very telltale of a certain space movie. that they were bad, and then now those are in. So we'll get to those. So what's the first one we want to talk about?
I feel like we should talk about the timeless transitions first. Get them out of the way. Like you said, 95% are cuts. 90%. I probably more than that is my guess.
Yeah.
And just to define this for the very beginners here, this is just two clips butted against each other. Nothing fancy happening. One clip ends, the next one starts. And the reason why most transitions are cuts is because one of the goals in editing is for editing to be invisible.
Yes.
That as soon as the viewer realizes that there's an editor behind the scenes, then the editor has failed, basically.
Yeah. You just had the I'm in a movie theater feeling in the middle of the movie. And I mean, sometimes that can be what you're going for, but most of the time you want it to keep on flowing. That's why you're doing it. And, a cut is really the really interesting thing is there's a lot of power in a cut through what we know as the Kuleshov effect, which is really that when you put two things next to each other, them being next to each other gives meaning to each other, even though they're not related. So the viewer will think two things are related just because you cut them together next to each other.
This is the basis of editing.
Totally. This is the thing that how we're able to give more depth to our stories through the contrast of images.
Yeah, that's right. So just to expand on the Kuleshov effect just a little more, and then actually we'll refer you to the article or the podcast episode about the Kuleshov effect. It's basically the idea, as an example here, that if you see someone's face and then it cuts to a shot of like a bowl of soup, then the viewer imparts hunger upon the person's face, right? Or maybe it's the reverse. Start with the soup, then show the face. But the idea is those two things together impart meaning on one another.
Yeah.
Even though, the bowl of soup might have been shot 2 years later on the other side of the planet, there's a connection made in the minds of the viewers that the person is looking at the bowl of soup and that person is hungry.
We create inference from that. We think the things are related because our minds want to understand things, and because of that, we end up projecting meaning onto things that didn't. So, instead of having the bowl of soup, I think the Kuleshov effect showed a beautiful woman and then the man, and then all of a sudden you thought, oh man, he's a hound dog. He's a ladies man, and before you saw soup and now you thought he was hungry. Like
same shot.
Yeah, exactly. Same exact, nothing changed except for the thing that was contrasted with it. And all of a sudden a different meaning comes from it. And that's really powerful, right? So those are our tools we have. Now you can do it in the way of like, I think of the Willy Wonka, the old Willy Wonka where they're going down a tunnel and all of a sudden they're seeing just weird things. And so it can give this you can really emote a lot of feelings from that, because you're able to really contrast those things with what you're doing or with the story or what you're seeing. Yeah,
that's what makes filmmaking an art, right? Is what you're taking all these shots and you're piecing them together in a way that is, like you said, each shot imparts meaning upon the other shots. And it's kind of like playing music or something when you start to link all these shots together in a way that tells story and invokes emotion. But kind of getting back to the transition itself, you want the shots themselves and the sounds to do the storytelling, not the page peel.
Yeah,
you don't want the page peel to remind your viewers that, oh, there's someone who's applying some sort of technical work behind the scenes here.
Yeah, and that's why you use a cut. Now, there's times when you might use something else, and we'll talk about those. But the cut is just trying to set up your story. I mean, it can be the answer to not having the right feeling for a scene. You could have a person that is coming into a scene, they have a conversation with somebody and they're out of the scene, right? Well, if you interject a shot at them looking at their watch and them looking like they're a little bit late, not saying they're late, just inferring it, that all of a sudden the pacing of that whole scene could be drastically changed by just that easy, simple cut between two things. But this is just the basic. This is if we could do an edit just from tape to tape. I've done this, right? So you press record on one, you start, you stop. But the only thing you could do is a cut, because There's nothing in between there, right?
Yep.
So cut, super easy, real simple. You'll find it in your editor under the cut tool or the blade.
Yeah,
or
it's actually
razor
not
blade.
listed as a transition.
No, it's more of a tool that you're using to create the two things. Yeah, you're not going to go into transitions and find cut. That's just butting two clips next to each other. And I think it's really interesting the amount of variance in what they call the tool that cuts along all the editors. And mostly they're related to when we cut film physically with a razor blade and tape it to another shot, therefore cutting the two pieces together. So that's where the term comes from, and that's where those tools come from. So it'll come up under blade, scissors, all sorts of things, but they're all, different ways of saying cut.
That's right. Now we'll come back to cut, but maybe we could go from there to dissolve, which some people call this a fade, but it's basically the overlaying of two clips and transitioning smoothly between them over time. So
with their opacity.
Yes, exactly.
Yeah, and I would say a fade is only a fade if it's coming to or from black.
Yes, that's right.
So you could be fade from black, fade to black. That's fade. Everything else is a dissolve.
Yeah, and the trick with the dissolve, or not the trick, I guess, but the thing with the dissolve is it implies usually a passage of time or a change of location.
Yes. Dissolves have a feeling of elegance with them sometimes, depending on when you're using them. I've seen them lots in weddings, when there'll be a nice soft dissolve because it's trying to be this elegant thing or really have this soft, because it is a very soft transition, right? There's no time when one starts and the other one begins. They just go on and off together.
Yeah. So, if you were doing a quick sequence of someone walking up to their car and opening the door and getting in and putting their seatbelt on and turning on the ignition, you would not use dissolves between all those shots.
No, that'd be weird. It'd feel very strange. The pacing would be really weird. You'd be thinking something was going to come from that, and then you just didn't. And so that's like red flag. You're a noob. You know what I mean? Like exactly right. You might use it then to fade to him unlocking his front door because you just showed time passing.
Yep. Although even then, if I saw someone get in their car and they're doing all the car things and then there was a fade of unlocking the front door, as a viewer, I wouldn't think, oh, he just got out of the car and walked to the door. It'd feel more like it's later in the day now.
Yeah. It's not just the travel that happened. Something in the story, things went on when you weren't around.
Right.
I think that's a real good thought on fade. Dissolves and zooms, I would put in the way of yesteryear. There's not a lot of use for them that is a great application of the tools that are now available. There's so many other ways to do that kind of feeling that's a better way. And dissolve is just, it'll work when it works, and it won't work in most other places. You can put them everywhere, but no, they don't look great.
Yeah, that's right. Although, ironically, you see some dissolves. Well, let me think about this. I'm trying to go through my memories. You see a dissolve during a live stream of an event.
Yep. Of a full screen going on, it might dissolve on. They have a T-bar on a controller, a live switch that you'd be doing, a live broadcast of something. So it's meant to be used. I mean, it's definitely used mostly. So in that case, you'd be going onto a full screen. We want it to be less jarring to go to this full screen graphic or whatever. Yeah. So you might see that. You'll see it in the news for sure in those situations. You'll see elements fade on, but you might not see the whole scene transition as a dissolve. So you might see graphics come on and off, fading up and then fading down. But I guess that wouldn't even be a dissolve at that point because it has to be going from one thing to another to be dissolving.
That's right. So you're going to see these dissolves, whenever there's not whenever, but often when there's a passage of time. But actually, the next, you kind of alluded to it, transition we have here is the fade, or fade to black, fade from black. You see sometimes this is called dip to black, if it happens quickly. This is another way to transition between periods of time. If you fade to black and then fade back up from black.
Yeah.
Then you're talking about a big transition. You usually see this in movies between acts, not even necessarily between scenes.
Yeah.
When there's a major shift in the story.
Yeah, you might have years pass, if, or the ending of an act of a story. Everything got buttoned up. We're fading to black. You might even see the end, right? I always think fade to black and fade up, fade from black are like the beginning and end of a movie.
Yeah,
that's about the times you see it. I definitely have known an editor that used it way too much, and I bet you, I can still see their work on TV and be like, oh, they made that because they dipped the black 3 times in 30 seconds. That's amazing. How is anybody hiring them for this? In my opinion, but the dissolve is, or the fade from to is, again, graphics and other things like that will be able to come up and down, but fading to black. And the thing is even fading to black has a bunch of different ways to fade to black. There's, just doing it via opacity, but like a film fade to black actually feels a little different and doesn't necessarily do it all in the same frame. It does it in a more organic feeling way. So the dissolve is a little bit different, but in this case, fade up, fade down, that's something you're doing at the beginning and the end of something. But it's not likely something that's going to work very well in the middle of a scene.
Yep. So let's go to another transition, and this is like a variation of one of the ones we've just spoken about, the jump cut.
Jump cut.
So this is not so much a transition as it's a different transition from a cut, but it's a cut in kind of a different context.
Yeah, until recently, it was an error. Until recently you see a jump cut, it was either to jar you or someone screwed up. I mean, that's like you would see. And a jump cut is a shot from one shot to another where not enough changes.
Yeah, that's right.
I mean, so if we were shooting Mike right now and we cut him and then just cut back to him 5 seconds later, he'd be in a little bit different position and it would be jarring.
Yeah.
And we see this a lot on YouTube now through vlogs and that kind of thing. So we've actually become a lot more desensitized to them. But still in cinema, you see this kind of thing, and surely it's going to be jarring.
Yeah, and actually, I would argue that even on YouTube, it's going out of style.
Really?
As in, I don't know about what kind of channels you're watching. I know some of the channels you're watching. This is very popular with a classic talking head style vlog.
Yeah.
But talking head style vlogs are not as common as they used to be.
Yeah, that's true. Well, and because of the amount of, stock graphics and all the rest, there's a lot of things to cover up with if you want to. I like the idea of embracing it for the sake of it brings down the cost of post-production. Yep. Usually means someone like me that's not an actor doesn't have to remember their lines, just need enough to be able to cut to the next thing. But jump cuts are really helpful if you want to do a jarring experience. If you want to all of a sudden turn where I learned what a jump cut was like the idea of doing an interview and then having just one more person jump into that scene and then shoot it and then cut between the two. And all of a sudden those people are just changing into another person. And that was, I remember that was doing interviews and we're like, oh, we probably ought to shoot this person on the left, this person on the right. We probably ought to do this one a little tighter because we don't know what order these are going to go in. And we don't want to jump from the same framing because it'll be awkward. Now, a jump cut can also be done by the shot being just not different enough from the shot. So it could be different, but maybe not enough angle on the shot from the one you're doing. And now it's going to be a jump cut. So if you're doing like a side angle on an interview and you're cutting to that closer shot, it could be a jump cut if your angle isn't enough or the zoom isn't enough. If there isn't enough difference between the two shots that it becomes feeling like, why am I just all of a sudden seeing this 5 feet away?
I believe in the article we wrote about this topic, we recommended 30-degree angle changes or
makes
more.
Sense. Yeah.
But this also happens with, I guess it's still an angle, but I was going to say the amount of zoom or medium to close up, right? So if you go from close up to medium to wide, that's okay. But if you go from close up to just slightly wider close up, that would be a jump cut.
Yeah. But I'm seeing that a lot more to cover up the jump cuts than I am seeing just cut,
at least
cut.
on YouTube.
Yeah, just a little bit of that. And I mean, and that's a smarter way, especially if you're dealing with resolution, to get around it. But definitely the jump cut is a good tool when you need it. it's definitely impactful. And well, it's so funny because I remember when I started out here, I was like, jump cuts, no bueno. No, we're not doing those. That's not going to happen. And I remember Greg, the person before me, he also felt the same way. And I don't feel the same way anymore. Jump cut, if it serves a purpose, do it.
Yeah, it's not new anymore,
Yeah, well, and it's not controversial in the way of like, I thought it was like, well, that's lazy. And then I started being the person in front of the camera. I'm like, that's not lazy. That's practical.
You're still not seeing it on TV.
No, not too much. I mean, and if you are, you're seeing it deliberately.
Yeah. Oh, there's like the most famous, well, I don't know if it is anymore, but one of the most famous jump cuts of all time was in 2001. Remember this one? The bone in the air. The primitive human throws the bone in the air, and the camera follows the bone up as it twirls in the air, and then there's a jump cut into 200,000 years into the future to a satellite, or more like a space station.
Yeah.
And the space station matches the basic shape of the bone exactly, basically.
Well, so that's the other kind of jump cut that you have to be aware of is, like we said, when you put two shots together, one gives the other meaning. Well, if they're unrelated but similar shapes, it might feel like a jump cut.
Yes.
Even if I was shooting, so we're shooting me and you, we're framed up about the same, but it's a different shot. But if you cut between you and me, it might feel like a jump cut because there's not that much difference between the two shots. Mm-hmm. So that even though the background and the subject matter is all changing, we're putting a like shot next to a like shot, and I've had this times where you didn't know it was going to happen until all of a sudden you did the edit and you're like, I can't put those two shots next to each other, or I need to change this one. I need to zoom in some, or I need to do something because this is giving me this, what am I watching feeling? And I don't want that. I want this just to go through. So sometimes you're not aware of the jump cut until you get into the edit and you're like, oh man, I should have got more coverage. That's usually my answer for a lot of stuff. It's like, man, if I only had something to cut away for a few seconds, this jump cut would be gone.
So how about maybe it's out of date now, the out of date way to cover up a jump cut, which is the flash transition. Or the bloom, I guess.
Yeah, or the lens flare. I mean, I think I put all those in the same way. The flash transition is just the idea of going. I mean, I remember the first ones I did. It was like literally a white solid that we went from 0 opacity to 100, and then down again over 7 to 10 frames.
It's basically the white version of the dip to black.
Yeah, well, or
quick.
Or in the way of like, it feels like a flash bulb,
yes.
Right? Like, because of that flash bulb, it changes enough things, it whitens your eyes, and then all of a sudden it's showing you something else. So, but it goes up and down real quickly. And then so that's the flash transition. You can make a bloom, which does that now through luminance. So you're doing going to white, but you're doing it through going up in exposure, going down in exposure.
A little bit more organic looking.
Yeah, a little bit more organic, but still similar feeling, probably more feeling like a flash. Mm-hmm. And then, we've had light leaks do the same kind of thing that are a little more modern than those other types of transitions, if they fit into the formatting and editing that you're doing.
Yeah, so I feel like we saw a lot of these probably from 2005 to 2015 or something. You don't see them as much anymore.
Maybe
in reality shows.
Yeah, it used to be if you added motion graphics to a production, it made the production worth more. And now I think we're getting to a point now where most people can get really good looking motion graphics with relative ease. And so they're using that. And what I'm saying about this is when you made all the stuff on your own, sometimes you had to figure out how to get stuff on and off the screen, or how to make a change, and it was more of the magician's trick of looking over here while I change something with my right hand. And so that's how I used a lot of the flash transitions. Like, well, I need the scene to change. I need all these graphics to be off, but I need to get onto another scene. Okay, we're going to use this here to cover up that harsher transition because you have so much information you're trying to read that all of a sudden if I go to a clean frame, it's going to look really naked.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. So moving on to one of my favorite cheesy transitions, the wipe.
The wipe. So this I alluded to earlier. This is the Lucas famous wipe.
Yeah, Star Wars.
Yeah, if you you can't use a wipe and not feel like it's a homage to Star Wars.
That's right.
It's just for the longest time, I remember thinking that's a Star Wars trick. No one uses that. It's just that's for Star Wars.
Yep.
And now it's not, because now I think that it's been used in other film as an homage, and now it's like, oh, you can use it unironically, which is kind of funny.
So there's this is a transition not to be confused with the slide in. So a slide in transition would be like there's another frame that is moving horizontally in front of another one.
You're replacing one frame with the other by pushing them off the.
Yeah, that would be even another one, right? So when you have one frame pushing one,
but this is one going over the top of the other one.
And then the wipe it actually reveals one.
Yeah, and usually not a hard line. It's a soft line that can go from left to right, right to left, top to bottom, bottom to
diagonal.
Top. Yeah, diagonal. Definitely the right to left. That's the very quintessential Star Wars, coming from the intro, story that they set up all their stories with. It's I guess some of them they do the pan down and that kind of thing, but I think usually they wipe to scene one.
Yeah, left to right, I think.
Is it? Yeah, left to right.
Yeah.
You're right.
Yeah,
and that makes sense in Western tradition. We read from top left to bottom right. So the one that's going to feel probably the most organic is going to be one coming from the left going to the right.
That's right. I really like the wipe. Maybe because I'm just an old school Star Wars fan. But I got a soft spot for that one.
I was using. See, we don't use a lot of transitions in our productions here, so I'm not using much of anything like that. But it was like when you found the project that you could do it in, it's like, oh, this is awesome. Just like the page turn we were talking about. Sometimes they have a place. If you're talking about turning a page, well, you use the turn page transition.
And the wipe has the same kind of effect as the dissolve does.
Yeah.
It's passage of time, new location.
It's soft. It doesn't, isn't jarring. It's definitely meant to be a subliminal time change.
Yep. And the crazy thing about this to me is whenever I see a wipe, it's not invisible to me. But I think for most people, wipes are kind of invisible.
They at least don't make them think anything. Like you and I are going, that's a wipe.
Right.
Whereas it's not a thing for other people.
Right. Right.
Just like when we watch any kind of movie, we say, oh, that's a thing. And it's like, shut up, I'm watching the movie.
So similar to the wipe, and see if you can think of what movie or franchise is famous for this. The iris transition.
So this is like closing up and opening again?
Yes, this is like the Porky Pig of the Looney Tunes.
Oh, yeah.
thing.
That's all, folks. Yeah, totally. And that's a hard one. Like, I can't say I've used that. Maybe I've used that with a burn or something like that to reveal something like in some cheesy commercial, but it's about the only time you could ever get away with it. I think I've seen it you see it a lot in cartoons, actually. It makes sense if that's where the tradition kind of came from is the Looney Tunes.
Or comedies, generally. Like you might see a comedy where, one shot is sort of irising around, I guess.
Yeah, but
you see a closing iris.
But it's the same thing as like the curtain going down.
Yeah, exactly.
That all of a sudden they're going to peek out and say something or whatever, or the circle's going to all of a sudden catch you on your head and you're like, what the heck? You know, so it's like, it's very self-aware in a lot of those situations. So it's definitely not one that's invisible. It's one that's embracing what it's doing, but probably not something that you're going to use in the middle of the scene. I mean, it's going to be pretty hard to find a adequate place to put that it's not going to be like, what the hell are you doing?
I put this on here as kind of like the border between I'm going to call them traditional transitions and the super cheesy transitions.
Yeah, it's like the ones you might use versus the ones that are just in the folder.
Yeah, exactly. So before we get to like the real cheesy ones, a couple others that are, again, they're kind of variations on some of the ones we previously talked about. The matched action cut.
Max action. So that's doing a cut that's kind of like the jump cut, really. Because the idea is that you're going seamlessly from one shot to another by the action being matched, so you don't really see the edge of the cut, right?
Yeah, I mean, you see this sometimes where you have sort of similar motion. So an example would be in Apocalypse Now when they would cut from the blades of a ceiling fan to the helicopter blades.
Yeah.
Where you just have it's kind of like a jump cut in a lot of cases. But yeah, you see this a lot of times. Actually, the most famous example is a punch, right?
Yeah.
Where the fist swings in, and right before it connects, it cuts to the reaction on the other side.
Fighting scenes, car racing scenes, that kind of stuff, always doing maxed action. It makes an exciting cut. That you're going to be using it multiple times in that case. But it's one of those things where it has a direction too. So, if you're cutting to a movement to the left, you're having the shot that follows really matching the action of the shot prior, and so that the transition between the two is not there.
Exactly. So this is one where you can really, I mean, there's a lot of skill involved here with getting these things to line up just right.
Yeah, I mean, cutting a fight scene is a difficult scene to edit.
Yeah.
Knowing, because the thing is you can't have one shot cut a little early, and then all of a sudden it's like the guy's fist is going forward, and then all of a sudden it's back 3 inches, and then it goes forward again.
Yeah.
That doesn't work. It feels wrong. And so it's from syncing up all the actions, that the fluid motion of whatever is moving in one shot is continuing into the next.
Yep, that's right. And it makes it especially difficult with fight scenes because there is never any connect. The punch doesn't actually exist. You have to cut around it.
Yeah.
Around where the punch would be.
And we put the sound effects so you think it's there.
Yeah. Okay, and then the last one, kind of a newer transition, the morph cut.
Morph cut. This is the end of the black or white video. They did it, and they shake their head, and they look left, and then they look right, and then their head morphs and changes into. And that was the first time I ever saw that, this is like the 90s, would have been a really difficult thing to do. And now there's a plugin that you just do it, and what it does is it morphs the shot that you had into the next shot.
So, Chris, there was you and I are thinking about a different thing, and I think you have the right one. The thing that I'm thinking of is probably like trademarked by Adobe. The thing where you take two shots that's basically a jump cut.
Oh, it's their plugin that does morph cut, which is trying to make it so that there is no cut.
It doesn't look like a jump cut at all. It looks like there would be a jump cut. You apply this thing and it sort of shimmies things around so that they line up, and it appears that there's no cut.
Yeah. It starts to change the shot just a little bit, a few frames before, so it starts to match, and then the shot that's coming up does the same thing, and they match their action in the middle so that you don't actually see the cut. So you could be doing an interview and not seem like you cut anything. However, I've never had it work.
Yeah.
It's always been a gimmick. I've had times where, this is the stuff that it would work the best for is the kind of thing I do the most of, which is just the talking head. And that should probably be the easiest thing to do, or at least that's how they demonstrate it most of the time. And not only is it super resource required to make it happen, is it just never looks right.
Yeah, there's always like some sort of weird digital artifacting.
Yeah, well, or you just do this, you start to look like the guy from Men in Black that wants to drink salt water or whatever, or sugar water.
Yeah. So maybe we drew the line at the wrong spot between traditional and cheesy. Iris probably goes in the cheesy category.
Yeah.
But there's countless cheesy transitions.
Yeah. So star wipe.
Star wipe, that's the star version of the iris, basically.
Yeah. And you can go in and out. I actually have seen like more of out it. So the star comes from the center, and then white reveals the next scene through the center, which is weird. Because that's the opposite of fading to black or doing the circle transition.
The iris
that's more
will
of
work.
like the curtain going down versus the curtains going open.
The iris transition will work both ways, where one shot could be over the top of another, or you could do black over the top of the shot.
Yeah, it's not one that's always A to B. It can B to A. It feels the same. They're all the same that way, frontwards and backwards. Whereas obviously the wipes, if they're directional, aren't going to happen.
Yep. Page peel is the classic cheesy one.
Yeah, I've used that I made a book commercial about a bookstore. You paid page peel to the end. Okay, that's acceptable. Every other time, no, come on.
Yep. There's the Venetian blinds.
Oh yeah, that's a bad one.
By the way, the implication here is you shouldn't use these.
Yes, yeah, they're you know, the thing is these days though, if you used them, you could use them really well. Ironically, I think they'd be really good comedy tools. But that's about it.
Yep.
You're going to probably see these in Saturday Night Live or some kind of thing like that before you see other things. But all they got to do is make it a filter on Instagram, and everybody will love it.
Yep.
One of my favorites, the cube transition, which is like it brings a cube up, leaves what you're going to see, and then the cube goes away. I can't even remember how it goes.
It like backs rotates. Up. It backs up. So it's like the full screen starts to get smaller, and as it gets smaller, you're seeing that the screen is actually one face of a cube.
Oh yeah.
And then the cube turns, revealing the new shot, which pushes back to the full screen.
Yes. And I've seen like the Brady Bunch type thing too. I don't know, the four screens.
Oh yeah. You see the next image start to come up piece at a time.
Yeah, exactly. They're like mosaic.
It's like mosaic.
Mosaic. Yeah, that would be it. And just so much of this stuff. Honestly, the only time I think I've used those is like on a DVD menu that I needed to make some things happen while you're waiting to watch the thing. It's like, I'm not going to spend a bunch of time making this DVD menu super awesome, but I'll make it do something for a little while, I guess. I don't know. It's been a long time since I made a DVD. I don't know the last time I had a drive on my computer, but that's
it's been a while.
A long time.
One I see a lot. Boy, what is it called? You might have it over there. It's a Final Cut Pro transition where it's like flashes, not like the flash transition, but it's just like camera flashes that sort of overwhelm the scene and then go away. See that one a lot. Yeah,
a burn. Burn is a transition that I've actually used that quite a bit. It's like Bonanza. Have you ever seen the opening of Bonanza? Something burns from the center and burns out and shows something, and it, kind of goes out in somewhat of a organic way. But yeah, again, unless you're doing a Western, probably not going to fit into what you're doing. And if it's not a spaghetti Western, it's probably going to not fit at all. What else is in here? So defocus transition, very similar to the bloom, which is go defocused and then focused again. The idea there is that you're blurring everything enough that the shot won't seem like a jump cut to the next thing.
Yeah, the cheesy version of that is the pixelated.
One. I see that a lot on, there's a show called, what's it called? Storage Wars. And whenever someone wins the auction for a storage, the person freeze frames and then they like pixelate everything around them. And I'm like, the show's been on for a long time. So I get like when they first started doing it, and now it's like their style guide. And I'm like, you guys got to think of something new. I mean, this seems, low budget reality television is not one where you're going to find really great cinematic tools to learn from. What other ones?
There's a checkerboard.
Oh, the checkerboard, where it's just like everything kind of...
It's like the Venetian blinds, but alternating in a checkerboard pattern. So half of it comes down in half the checkerboard and then the other half on the other.
So we're talking about all these really... cheesy ones, good ones. Like I said, we're still going to talk 90%, 95% is going to be a cut. But if I back up a little bit to thinking about when I first started, I was shooting, we were editing on a Media 100, which was a computer that was specifically made just to do video editing. It didn't do anything else. You turned it on and it opened up the editing system, like the program. So that's all the program was on it. That's all we did. And I couldn't preview real-time fades or dissolves. So I did cuts because I couldn't preview in real time anything. It would do red. It would just show a blank screen or red screen. I can't even remember what it show you. Maybe even bars and tone. And you could, and then you could output at that and it would render. It might even take all night to show you real-time renders of your transitions. And now I think about that and it's like, what would ever bog you down these days that you couldn't just take off that because it was unnecessary? I mean, most things, whenever my computer starts slowing down, it's like, oh, I'm doing something crazy that probably isn't warranted by what I'm working on. But the timeline of how we went from, like when I was doing linear editing, that's where those weird cheesy edit things. And I think that's where we're finding them still. Like you're finding types of transitions in your switching board for doing a live broadcast. So those still exist there. In fact, I think I have a couple of these built into this, this Slink Studio that we're using to go between things. We didn't talk about, like doing picture-in-picture ones, which that reminds me of like, I feel like maybe it's between two ferns. No, it's man, what's the guy's name? James P. Riley, when he's like doing a public access show where it does the same thing where like there's a TV and all of a sudden the image in the TV will come up and take up the full screen to cover up, very much like very 80s coming, the image coming from the background or whatnot.
There's definitely a lot of stylistic transitions from that era in the 90s too. You remember the transitions that Home Improvement used to use?
Yeah, well, and I remember that was one of the first times I was like, I tried figuring out how it worked. I'm like, oh, there's green screen here, they're replacing this, and then they're doing, because it was stop animation.
Yeah.
And it was, quite frankly, it was pretty cutting edge when they were doing it. And you see it now, and it's just like, along with the sound effects and stuff, it's cheesy for sure.
Yeah.
But yeah, like the breaking, well, where I see transitions that I really love is Mythbusters does mostly just cutaways that are really good, or they do sparks or that kind of thing. And it's those scene changers are really valuable to the flow of things. If you don't want to like all of a sudden come to a halt, you can do something like go into a commercial break or something.
That's right. So a lot of ways to change, go from shot to shot or scene to scene. I think we covered all the big ones.
Yeah. But you'd be safe just to cut
and dissolve and fade.
Yeah.
And you pretty much got it all.
Yeah. And
even dissolve, I think you're right. You're not seeing those as much anymore.
Yeah. And you're going to see fade up and fade down only at the beginning and end of things. So like we said, most of it's cuts. And the thing is, you can, matching action. Well, that's a cut too, right?
Yeah.
So there's a lot of different types of cuts that, from parallel editing cuts, jump cuts, invisible cuts to matching cuts, cutaways, all sorts of different types of cuts that can somewhat fall into that space more as little niches off the side that you'll need to use them. But just, running one image into the next is going to do it most of the time.
Pretty much. Well, that pretty much, I'm not going to say it covers it all. I think if we didn't mention one of the transitions that is your favorite on this podcast, it should probably no longer be your favorite.
Yeah. I don't think we went over, we passed up any important ones, but if there's one that you're like, man, there's a xylophone one that was like, the things like fell down over it to show you the new image. It was like
that's right.
each key.
I own that one.
Oh yeah, that's my favorite. That one. I'm going to use that on my next masterpiece.
Right.
The xylophone transition.
All right. Okay, so that's plenty of transitions to consider for your next project, I guess. So.
Yeah.
All right, thanks everyone for tuning in. We'll catch you next time. Big thanks to everyone for listening. Big thanks to MPB for sponsoring. And as always, if you've been listening to the podcast and you enjoy it, we'd love to see a 5-star written review on iTunes or Apple Podcasts. Apple is still the 800-pound gorilla in the podcast world, and those reviews help us be discovered by other listeners. So we'd love it if you did that. So for Chris Monlux and everyone here at Videomaker, I'm Mike Wilhelm, and you've been listening to the Videomaker podcast. We'll catch you next time.